Hear that? That's the sound of speechless. Like when you give her an unforgettable gift from Jared the Galleria of Jewelry. Whether it's one of the hundreds of new pieces in our collection, one of the exclusive pieces you can only find at Jared, or a custom piece we create just for you, Jared is the place to find the gift.
I love it.
That takes her breath away. And that's why he went to Jared.
Want an easy way to see if you could save money on car insurance? Geico gives you 3. Call 1-800-947-AUTO. Go online to geico.com or stop by the Geico office nearest you. 3 ways you could save 15% or more.
Our new presenting sponsor is ZipRecruiter. Are you looking for a smarter way to hire great candidates? With ZipRecruiter, 80% of employers who post a job get a quality candidate through the site in just 1 day. Try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/06010. That's ZipRecruiter.com/06010.
And it's like they're terrible. And then the one day a restaurant critic shows up, they're actually great. And so he writes this amazing review. And what happens is people keep coming to the restaurant expecting greatness. And, of course, it's all terrible. It's awful. And you leave in tears.
You're in the 06010. Never gonna hustle in case you didn't know. Matthew Berry, TMR.
You guys go ahead, give me grief for being on SportsCenter for 45 seconds. I think you could do better than me because I don't think you could.
Jailbait, Field Yates.
You're terrible at hashtag improv. At Field Yates. At Field Yates.
Stephania Bell.
Oh, don't let Barry convert you.
Secret Squirrel, Daniel Dodd.
Make it happen.
Mediocre fantasy advice.
You're older than people realize.
That never stops.
Loyal 06010 listener.
Welcome into the Fantasy Focus Football Podcast. It is Monday, and the playoffs are underway.
Playoffs?
Not bad.
It's a little more, yeah. You got to, it's weird when you say it. You got to turn your head a little bit, like Coach Mora. Playoffs?
Get that facial expression involved, too.
Yeah.
Because the meme has captured that, like not just the sound, but the meme has captured that face of Jim Mora. But the playoffs are underway with a lot of matchups yet to be determined because we have one more game tonight. You are Matthew Berry. She is Stephania Bell. Good morning to both of you.
Correct. Nice job.
Thank you.
A lot of people say the Fantasy Focus podcast inaccurate, but Field Yates 2 for 2 right off the bat.
Fantasy Focus Football Podcast. I am Field Yates.
3 for 3.
There we go. Thank you. Let's keep it going.
Yeah.
What's my name,
How
Field?
about this? When I screw up, does that mean I get to leave the podcast? If I first screw up, I get to go?
No. Absolutely not.
Dang it.
First screw up, you got to take your shirt off.
If the rule were when you screw up, you get to leave.
This would have ended 10 years ago.
My goodness, the podcast wouldn't exist. Podcast wouldn't have existed. Honestly, it would just be not cool Keith looking at a bunch of empty microphones is what the show would actually be. How'd you do? How are your fantasy playoffs?
We'll find out tonight.
Find out tonight.
Yeah.
What do you need?
Well, it depends. So in the War Room League,
Yes, sir.
myself and Matt Harrington need, I think, it's 39 or 40 points, I think, from Deion Lewis and Jarvis Landry. So this is one of those,
Got this in the bag.
You know the great movie Dumb and Dumber?
Yeah, sure.
So you're telling me there's a chance.
There's absolutely a chance.
You're telling me there's a chance. It hurt. That late Eagles touchdown.
Oh, my
Eagles
God.
defensive touchdown. Is an 8-point swing for that?
There was so many times. I mean, we'll go through them, but that was like, I'm sure that'll make Van Pelt's bad beats.
Yeah.
It would have to be like, that was brutal. Especially because how many people started the Eagles defense?
In this room or like?
No. Just what was their start percentage? Like, because I'm sure it was high.
Yeah.
I'm sure it was pretty high. So there were a lot of games like that where they were just, I think about Travis Kelce, and Alex Smith. But yeah, that last second Eagles touchdown, that was a tough one. So anyway, you need 40 points from Landry and Deion Lewis. You got it. You got it, baby. It's like they always say, you put it out into the universe, you think it's going to happen, you will it to happen, and it will.
Rewind. Fantasy news from the National Football League. This is the instant replay.
We have a lot of football to get to. A lot of ground to cover.
That was so lame.
Where should I have gone with it? Because I was trying to make something out of it. Where should I have gone with it?
I don't know. Maybe you were painted into a corner.
Yeah, I mean,
we have a ton of stuff to get to today. Dan, you were away over the other corner. You were over at the other computer.
I'm trying to get your live read together, and I'm looking. There's pictures of your eyebrows. I got that one memorized.
I do it every day. I got it memorized.
Eagles, by the way, Eagles defense started in 44% of leagues. Thank you, Kyle.
We'll talk a lot about the Eagles today on the show for reasons to not involve their defense. Let's begin in what was one of the most enjoyable games to watch if you weren't actually at the stadium. The Bills and the Colts, 13-7 is the final. The Bills win this game in overtime. This was truly...
That was amazing, by the way, that you're like, you know they're miserable out there. There's snow everywhere. Colts are wearing white jerseys.
Preseason overtime. It's like no one wants to be there for overtime.
No, and then all of a sudden, right now they got to play extra minutes.
So for those who may have missed it, there was literally by the end of the game, there was 8 inches of snow on the ground. Just an absolute whiteout in Buffalo, in Western New York. Basically, neither team could really throw the football. In the end, Jacoby Brissett did attempt 22 passes for a total of 69 yards. Nice outing from him, but still, really, it was a ground and pound game. Frank Gore, 36 rushes, 130 yards, 15 total points in PPR scoring. But that was it. I mean, Jack Doyle does catch a touchdown, 2 for 4 with a touchdown, and he was their leading pass catcher in terms of production yesterday.
I mean, he bailed you out there because Jack Doyle, I'm sure, was started in a lot of leagues here. And
with that touchdown.
It's one of the more reasons, by the way, where we say, hey, tune into Fantasy Bowl now, because we were tweeting, we were showing the tweets from the stadium. We were talking about, hey, this is going to be a ground and pound game. You do not want a pass catcher in this particular game. Will be interesting to see what happens with Frank Gore. 37 total touches in this game, and now has to turn around and play the Thursday night game.
Yeah, and our friend Stephen Holder, who covers the Colts locally in Indianapolis, said, I think he tweeted something to the effect of, he's never seen a running back who left that game and looked more physically impacted by it.
He said blood on his uniform,
bruised. What a gamer Frank Gore is.
Well, Frank Gore,
but that's Frank Gore.
He's a Hall of Famer.
Not much to glean from this game because of the fact that there was so much snow. But on the Buffalo side,
the only thing would be is, again, as we get closer to Thursday with Frank Gore.
If he's, I'm sure maybe they'll limit his reps a little bit this week. But LaShawn McCoy ran great for the Buffalo Bills yesterday, 32 rushes, 156 yards, plus a touchdown. That was the walk-off touchdown. But unfortunately for the Bills, there were some offensive injuries, including quarterback Nathan Peterman, who started in place of Tyrod Taylor, Stephania. Then he entered the concussion protocol.
Right, so now they're down Tyrod and Nathan Peterman. Tyrod clearly couldn't have played in that weather. Yeah. I mean, that would have been a factor even if he had recovered more than he had. But we'll see if Nathan Peterman's back next week.
Yeah, and in the meantime, Joe Webb actually is the possible starter for the Bills in Week 15 against the Dolphins. Joe Webb, the special teams ace, the former wide receiver, quarterback, a jack of all trades. And then Kelvin Benjamin, Stephania, finishes with 12.8 points, including a touchdown yesterday. But he did get banged up with that knee. Eventually finished the game, but something we're going to track throughout this week.
Right. I guess he said afterward that he was pretty optimistic about it going forward. But there have been no specifics yet as to just how much an aggravation there was. Look, it's a torn meniscus that's not going to heal on its own.
Right.
And we told you there was a possibility of aggravating this as he came back. But I thought before that happened, he actually looked pretty good considering the conditions.
Yeah, sure.
The Bears and the Bengals, the Bears get the job done in resounding fashion. Who would have thought they would have just absolutely steamrolled Cincinnati? 33-7 is the final score.
Jordan Howard drives me crazy.
Why?
Because he's just because
he came on the podcast last year.
I know, a friend of the podcast, but I mean, just his usage. You know what I mean? Good matchups, he doesn't do anything, and then here you're like, all right, maybe you're down on him a little bit this week, and then he explodes.
Not I.
Or maybe he's on your War Room League team, and then he didn't help you.
There you go.
Then you're not in the playoffs, and then look at him go nuts.
Yeah.
And you watch, and you're bitter.
Yeah, Stefan, you want the bitter berry?
Yes, actually, I do.
For a lot of reasons. Nothing to do with Jordan Howard, actually.
I'm just going to pile it on.
Yeah. Well, Jordan Howard goes for 23 rushes, 147 yards, and 2 touchdowns. That's 28.5 fantasy points.
Right while he was talking about Jordan Howard.
Here's the good news for Jordan Howard. If you are rostering him and you are still in the playoffs, these next 2 games might not be ones that you feel like Chicago's going to get run out of the yard. They play at Detroit and then home versus the Browns. They finish up with Minnesota, which if your league goes into Week 17, not a great matchup. But for the next 2 weeks, not terrible for Jordan Howard.
Correct.
Also from the Bears, Kendall Wright, 10 catches, 107 yards, 11 targets. This is one of those where at the end of the season you have to kind of pick and choose between one-time occurrences and things that are likely to repeat. I would file Kendall Wright as the more likely to be the one-time occurrence than it would be a repeatable action.
Last 3 games, he has a total of 11 targets, which is what he had in this particular game.
Right.
Week 4, the last time he had over 50 yards prior to this game. I would agree with you. I think more fluky than not.
Yeah, Tariq Cohen's been more involved recently for the Bears. He's all of a sudden available in about 60% of leagues if you're looking for a desperation ad in a 16-team league. Not necessarily a fantasy sign, but a really good performance from Mitch Trubisky yesterday. Somebody that the Bears faithful, I'm sure, is very happy about this. It's been a tough start to his career because of the weapons around him. So few pieces you can rely upon in Chicago. For the Bengals, just brutal. They looked like a team that was at best uninspired, at worst just interested. Giovanni Bernard, though, did make good on his opportunity. He filled in for Joe Mixon, 19 points, 6 catches for 68 yards, 62 rushing yards on 11 attempts. If Joe Mixon misses again next week, then I think you can again feel pretty good about Giovanni Bernard as a close to top 20 play, even against a tough Minnesota defense.
100%.
Yeah, and beyond
friend
that,
of the podcast, Giovanni Bernard.
That's correct. Giovanni Bernard stays on the radar. Anthony Dalton was just terrible in this game, 14 for 29, 141 yards. Brandon LaFell scores a touchdown of all Bengals wide receivers. But again, for Cincinnati,
Listen,
it's A.J. Green. It's Giovanni Bernard or Joe Mixon, and that's
but if you counted on them, if you counted on Andy Dalton,
what do?
They bone you.
They do.
They're the Cincinnati boners.
They had an opportunity to make a push for the playoffs, and then in a matter of 6 days, 2 losses.
They bone their fans
completely.
They bone their fans.
Those chances.
What they do.
I feel really bad for Keith. I feel bad for the fighting Keith Lipscombs because they had a chance.
I feel
yesterday.
bad for Cincinnati fans. Before we start feeling bad for Keith, I'm going to just say I feel bad. I feel bad for fans of the Bengals franchise.
I mean, I do as well. However,
you do know that Keith's team is undefeated, or
right.
Unfeated.
Winless.
Unfeated.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So, do you understand that?
I feel bad for Keith. I feel bad for Bengals fans.
I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Do you understand that the Bengals have more wins this season?
Okay.
Than the Browns have since November 23rd of 2014. All right. So you can feel bad for the Bengals, and I do as well. But I really feel bad for Keith because the Cleveland Browns almost got it done yesterday. They almost did. The Browns, they come up short in overtime to the Green Bay Packers, 27-21.
You see Schefter's tweet? John Dorsey already in the hot seat.
Yeah,
he's joking. He's obviously joking.
Very tongue-in-cheek, but that's really good right there from Shefty. But for the Packers, what an awesome performance from Jamal Williams. Last week during the podcast, Mike Clay and I debated whether or not we thought it was Jamal Williams or Aaron Jones, and I got Mike to come around by the end of the week, for the record. I thought it was going to be Jamal Williams because of how he played the week before, and
if you read Love Hate, I was in there saying I am definitively. I think I said that too. I know I just said it on the TV show.
Sure, yeah. It's certainly Jamal Williams' job, and I don't think at this point there's much he could do to have that change. 30.8 fantasy points yesterday. He had a receiving touchdown, 7 catches for 7 targets, 15 rushes for 49 yards, and a touchdown. Aaron Jones had 4 rushes for -2 yards. It's clear who the running back you want to start is going forward.
They think of Aaron Jones as more of a change of pace guy, and Williams is obviously, their thumper here. Last 3 games, he's averaging over 125 total yards per game. I mean, he's been nothing short of terrific. And, oh, by the way, guess who they get at quarterback next week?
Aaron, we think, Stephania. We don't know for sure, but we believe Aaron Rodgers could very well be back.
Listen, this is exciting news, especially because that win really, I think, made a huge difference because let's be honest, we talk about the seasonal calendar, but also the situation being a factor. Consider this, go back. It's week 6 is when he injured himself. So October 15th has surgery, plate screws put in, gets to return to practice in the first week of December. He's been the scout team quarterback, which is just so great.
Right,
I'm just like picturing him being the scout team quarterback and everybody on the team talking about how great he looks throwing. And one of the reasons that we talked about surgery, whether it was required by the injury or not, the advantage of having surgery is that he could move that shoulder sooner. And I think you're seeing the effects of it in terms of what he's been able to do in practice. His teammates talking about him throwing 40, 50 yards and looking fantastic, like he's never left. He's reportedly undergoing a CAT scan again this week. They had said he would not go through imaging tests until it was looking like he would be able to return to play. So this is kind of the final step. Does the collarbone look good on imaging? And if he goes through full practice this week, then I think you're going to see him.
That's great news right there for the Green Bay Packers. Great news for all of his wide receivers as well. But Devontae Adams is like, dude, I don't need anybody. I can just get it done. Devontae Adams, 10 catches, 84 yards, 2 touchdowns on 14 targets, including the walk-off score. He told us on Operation Football yesterday, the first ever walk-off score in his life. He has had scored in overtime or has scored late touchdowns previously, but the first time he
just
had a
kept
walk-off
running.
Score, he just
like right through the tunnel.
Right,
it was
great.
It was awesome. That's the way you want to walk off, right?
Yeah. Totally. And I mean, this was a comeback victory for the Packers. Obviously they were down in this game and had to rally to tie it up, and then obviously to win it. So again, our heart goes out to Keith and all the Browns fans here. Tough one, but Jordy Nelson, who's still out there.
No, he's not.
What, really?
He's out there in 6% of leagues.
All right, there you go.
Yeah, I checked it for the waiver wire.
I'm surprised to hear that. Wow.
I was stunned. I was prepared to write a little note and say, hey, Jordan Nelson has been dropped in 25% of leagues.
Sure.
Go be smart.
That's what I would have thought too. My bad.
6% availability.
Is that less than Rodgers' availability?
Rodgers, I think, was at like 75.
No, I think he's at 60%, something like that. He's at like 60-something
for the past couple of weeks. Well, we can find out for sure. Maybe Kyle will check that with us. Obviously, that would be the number 1 player to go add this week in Aaron Rodgers, presuming he does play on Sunday. Let's get to the Browns because there is some information here. So the Browns actually played better yesterday.
64%. Okay. So, yeah.
Yeah, so you got a shot.
There you go.
There you go.
Take a look.
There's the guy right there.
36%.
Go get him.
He's available in your league.
Go ahead and get Aaron Rodgers. In the meantime, for the Cleveland Browns, Deshaun Kaiser actually played pretty well yesterday. He had a couple of bad interceptions, but he's got 17.3 fantasy points, which has him somewhere in the vicinity of a board bet.
You and I bet, I think I bet that he would be a top 20 fantasy quarterback for the season. Now, if I'd been smart, which I'm not, but if I'd been bright, I would have made it on a points per game basis.
Right.
It's total points.
Yep.
So he is currently quarterback 24 in total points.
Yep.
He trails Eli by 4.5 points, Mariota by 24.1, Jacoby Brissett 24.5, Deshaun Watson by 25.3. Jameis Winston, incidentally, is just behind him at QB 25. Do I win this board bet? Field Yates. He's going to pass Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, that's
but
right.
He basically has to outscore Jacoby Brissett by 24.5 points the rest of the way. He has to outscore Marcus Mariota by 24.1. I feel good about him being able to get past Eli.
I like his chances to get by Eli. I like his chances to get by Watson. It's going to be close.
Yeah.
It'd be close.
They've got a legit shot here, and the addition of Josh Gordon field certainly helps his cause.
Yeah, and he's been great. Josh Gordon has 3 catches, 69 yards, and a touchdown yesterday. Just a really strong outing again from him. Most of it came in the first half, but Josh Gordon plays well. Heck, Corey Coleman also played well. 5 for 62 on 6 targets with a touchdown. He's got 9.4 fantasy points in 3 of the 4 games since his return. Certainly a player to keep an eye on in deeper leagues, especially with PPR scoring. And good for you, Isaiah Crowell. 19 rushes, 121 yards. Also,
he looked great.
3 catches.
This is the guy we all drafted.
He's in a contract year. All of a sudden, he's looking to get paid, and certainly timing is everything in life, and Isaiah Crowell is timing it up right now. The Chiefs absolutely just roast the Raiders yesterday. The Raiders basically forgot to show up to Arrowhead Stadium. 26-15 is the final, but it was not nearly that close. I said Arrowhead. There we go. Daniel's looking for a ding. It was not nearly that close between these two teams yesterday. For the Raiders, I mean, listen, these stats I'm going to give them to you, but they're all hollow. Jared Cook, 5 receptions, 75 yards, and a touchdown.
Jared Cook is the most... I don't know if he's the most, but he's one of the most annoying fantasy players out there. Because you're like, because you're like, no. And then you're like, you know what? He's got a good matchup, and you start him, and he does nothing. Then he's got another good matchup, and you're like, oh, well, this will be the week, and he does nothing. And then he's got a tough matchup, and then he goes off. And you know what I mean? And like every time you want to just be like, I'm done with you.
Yeah.
I'm done. He goes 5 for 75 and a touchdown.
5 for 75 and a touchdown. Again, a lot of that late for Jared Cook. Michael Crabtree, 7 for 60. A lot of that late as well. Marshall,
he got 13 targets. He got the looks. 7 for 60, not terrible, but you would have thought, given the matchup, given the usage, he might have been a little bit better here.
Might not have been a player that we discussed more on Fantasy Football Now yesterday than Amari Cooper. The reason why, we thought he wasn't going to play starting on Friday, and then all of a sudden he was active, but we knew there were some concerns, and Stephania, he leaves this game early with an ankle injury.
I can't say that I was surprised. I mean, we had this exact conversation, and it was after we'd gotten a report from Diana Rossini that they were impressed with how he looked on Friday's practice, which granted was very limited, but the decision was to wait until Sunday and make the call, and she was told that he would not be out there unless he was 100%. And the conversation we had on the show was, how can you go from so questionable that you're not expected to practice Friday to 100% on Sunday? We did not think that was likely. And sure enough, it didn't take long. He got rolled up on if you didn't see the play. I mean, it could have injured you had you not been previously injured, but certainly with him already struggling, he was quickly ruled out for the rest of the game.
Yeah, so Cooper, we'll see whether or not he plays in Week 15. They host the Dallas Cowboys. Hey, Raiders, you had a chance to take a division lead going into Week 15, and you decided you forgot to show up. That, to me, was one of the worst performances by a team yesterday.
Can you start Derek Carr at all? He just looked brutal.
Yeah, I mean, even in a good matchup next week, I'm not sure I'm going to trust him that much, right? He's been off all year.
And what was so weird is, listen, Marshawn gets into the end zone, salvages his day, and I know game flow had something to do with this, but Lynch has been nothing short of terrific recently. He's
been great. He's been their best offensive player over the past month.
And you give him 8 touches?
Yeah. Weird day from the Oakland Raiders. Hey, here was good news. For the first time since Week 3, Kareem Hunt found the end zone. Not only did he find the end zone, but he had 22.8 fantasy points, 25 rushes for 116 yards, and a score, 3 receptions for 22 yards, 22.8 fantasy points, as I just said. So this was a really good day from Kareem Hunt. Back to the basics, so to speak, for the Kansas City Chiefs.
Unfortunately, I'm sure a lot of people that have him on their rosters
didn't start him.
Either didn't start him or potentially missed the playoffs.
Right.
Because, I mean, he had that brutal scoreless streak. He hadn't scored since Week 3, Field.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
And honestly, who knows if he scores in this game if Travis Kelce falls down 6 inches further.
Right. For those who may have missed that play, Travis Kelce had a touchdown that was ruled on the field as a score. Upon further review, he was ruled to have been down at the 6-inch line. Kareem Hunt ended up finishing the job on that on that play, on that drive. That's fantasy heartbreak for Travis Kelce, who also had another touchdown, I believe, called back because of a penalty. And maybe the biggest fantasy heartbreaker would be Alex Smith.
100%.
Those 2 Travis Kelce touchdowns called back. Also, he hit wide open Demetrius Harris for what would have been a touchdown. Harris, I mean, it was a little bit above his reach, but he should have caught that pass. Very catchable ball. That is not a touchdown. So Alex Smith gets you just 11.1 fantasy points. But I think if you started him, the process was still right. I don't think I can fault you too much for the result.
No, 100%. So it'll be interesting to see what you do with Kareem Hunt going forward here. What was nice here is the usage, 28 total touches in this game. He'd had 24 total in his previous 2 games. They play the Chargers next. Certainly a better defense than Oakland.
And keep an eye on this. That game is Saturday night. That game being played in Kansas City.
Yep.
We have that to deal with again.
Yes, Saturday night games. Looking forward to those. Stephania, maybe not so much. Blue Apron is the #1 fresh ingredient and recipe delivery service in the country with the highest standards for ingredients and building a community of home chefs. Blue Apron offers 3 plans. A 2-person meal plan, which is perfect for people like Chapin and I. Meals that serve 2 people. You choose from 8 new recipes per week with the choice to receive either 2 or 3 recipes any week. You get the family meal plan for the 8 children in the Berry family. Well, not quite 8, but meals that serve 4 people. You choose from 4 new recipes per week with the choice to receive either 2, 3, or 4 recipes for any week. Then you get the wine plan for the wine connoisseurs. The Stephania plan. 6 bottles of wine from renowned winemakers delivered monthly.
They really have set it up so that one's for you, one's for Matthew, one's for Stephania.
I'm telling you, they know. Blue Apron, this is our jam. We love Blue Apron here on the podcast.
Pretty psyched about
I'm sitting here and I'm
pretty psyched about this edition.
I'm not hungry at all, but I'm starving right now, if that makes sense. Because I'm looking at the recipes. Yes.
I know.
This month's recipes include spicy shrimp bucatini with cabbage and toasted breadcrumbs. Also, roasted chicken and maple butter with mashed sweet potatoes and collard greens. Like the clothing company collard greens. Convenience and variety are amongst the highlights of Blue Apron because Blue Apron delivers fresh, pre-portioned ingredients and step-by-step recipes right to your door that can be cooked in under 45 minutes. The menu changes every week based on what's in season and is designed by Blue Apron's in-house culinary team. Blue Apron sends only non-GMO ingredients and meat with no added hormones. And it's treating fantasy-focused football listeners to their first 3 meals, a $30 value with your first order if you visit blueapron.com/FFF. So check out this week's menu and get $30 off with free shipping at blueapron.com/FFF. Blue Apron, a better way to cook.
Hear that? That's the sound of speechless. Like when you give her an unforgettable gift from Jared the Galleria of Jewelry. Whether it's one of the hundreds of new pieces in our collection, one of the exclusive pieces you can only find at Jared, or a custom piece we create just for you, Jared is the place to find the gift.
I love it.
That takes her breath away. And that's why he went to Jared.
You can always count on Bud Light, just like you can always count on Always Game Gary. No bar is too far. No wing sauce is too hot. Not for Gary. Always Game Gary is famous among friends. He deserves a Bud Light. Enjoy responsibly. Bud Light Beer, AB St. Louis, Missouri.
It's New York Times bestselling author Matthew Berry with another self-serving, self-indulgent, all-about-me promo.
The Fantasy Life app just continues to crush it in terms of the updates, in terms of the alerts, in terms of the community. It's 100% free. It is a great app. The people that are on there, if you need last-minute advice, you jump into a chat, you can post a poll, you can post a question, engage with other people like yourself that love fantasy football. It's a very helpful community as well. And again, like the alerts are unbelievable. They're just on top of it. They've got this crazy system that they figured out. I got nothing to do with it, but I'm proud to have my name associated with it. They just do it. And again, it's a free app. Literally costs nothing. Why wouldn't you do it? Even if you're like, I don't feel like chatting, although that's one of the best parts of the app. The alerts are worth it as well. So just download it today. Go to fantasylifeapp.com or just search in the App Store for Matthew Berry's Fantasy Life, iOS and Android.
Very cool stuff right there. The Fantasy Life app keeps you updated all day. On Sundays, certainly very useful. And when you have injuries or inactives or player breakouts, etc.
Yeah, just people that missing practice. There's news. Yeah, I mean, they're great.
The Giants and the Cowboys played at MetLife Stadium yesterday, and this game was close for a while, and all of a sudden it became not close. The Cowboys steamrolled the G-Men. 30-10 is the final score. If you played Rod Smith, which I can't imagine too many people actually started him, the good news is he got you 33 fantasy points. That came on just 11 touches. He had a long touchdown catch from Dak Prescott, 81 yards. He also had a long touchdown run. Before you go and wonder and say, hey, should I be adding him to the team? One more week until Zeke Elliott returns. He's back in week 16.
Yeah, and just how repeatable is that? I mean, so this is a guy that was out-snapped by Alfred Morris in a significant way, out-touched by him. Morris has 22 touches. Smith has 11. When Ezekiel Elliott went down with his injury, suspension, there was talk about, listen, they like Rod Smith internally. They think he might be the most talented complete back here, but inexperienced and that kind of stuff. And so you certainly saw the talent on display yesterday. But the fact of the matter is Alfred Morris didn't do anything wrong to lose this job.
Right, exactly.
And so he's look, they're at Oakland next week. You certainly like that matchup here, but he is merely he's a flex. He's a PPR flex.
At best. At best, in a deeper league. The most important thing I think from this offense yesterday was that Dak Prescott looked much, much better. 20 for 30, 332 passing yards, 3 touchdown passes, and a good matchup next week against the Oakland Raiders. That hand did not seem to bother him at all. Dak Prescott back on the QB1 radar for week 15. For the Giants, yesterday was yet another disappointing day. Eli Manning returned to the starting lineup. He goes 31 for 46.
Got a standing O.
28 pass. Yeah, of course, and he's really well respected, and we understand exactly what Eli Manning has meant to that franchise, but this team right now is a mess when it comes to fantasy relevance. However, we did see something that was pretty interesting, and on Fantasy Football Now, Dan Graziano, who was covering the game for Sunday NFL Countdown in New Jersey, noted that he thought there could be more of Wayne Gallman, the rookie runner out of Clemson. Mm-hmm. And perhaps this was a Ben McAdoo preferred Orleans Darkwa, and Mike Sullivan, their offensive coordinator, felt as though there was a better opportunity to work Gallman in. And we saw a lot of Gallman yesterday, to the tune of 19 touches,
that's
12 rushes,
Dan Graziano
59 yards. Say it again?
I said, that's our Dan Graziano for you. He drops those really good nuggets. Look.
Well, Field actually... It's super annoying, actually, because what happens is we all get the information at the same time, and Field beat me to the waiver wire to pick him up in a league that you and I are both in. But
Field's got quick reflexes.
He does. He's more nimble, skinnier fingers.
He hustles.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
Fair, all fair. But what I was going to say is, again, like, whatever, whether you like me or Field or Tim or Stephania, whatever, the reporters do a great job for us on Fantasy People Now. You always learn nuggets like that. And so yeah, people are like, wow, who knew about Wayne Gallman? And the answer is we did, thanks to Dan Graziano. Nice call there, Dan.
Yep. So Wayne Gallman also had 7 catches for 40 yards on 9 targets. That's an interesting flex pickup this week.
Yes, sir.
You know, if you play in 12-team or larger leagues, I think you could do worse than adding Wayne Gallman. The Giants, in every game, you'd expect them to be playing, if not from behind, at best in a tight game.
And one of the reasons, by the way, that we think this, just to reiterate, that Graziano thought with Ben McAdoo apparently has been like the biggest Darkwa supporter within the building, and so obviously he's no longer there. So
right. So Darkwa has 10 carries for 29 yards yesterday and 2 catches for 15 yards. A disappointing day for Sterling Shepard, just 2 catches for 16 yards for him. He also had 1 rushing attempt for -9 yards.
Yeah.
Roger Lewis, 7 for 46 on 11 targets. What are you going to do? You're not starting Roger Lewis in the playoffs.
Right.
The Lions go to Tampa Bay and win a game. It was weird. I had on the TVs that I was watching next consecutively, was to the left was Buffalo and Indianapolis. On the right was Indianapolis and Detroit and Tampa Bay.
Oh, wow.
The color,
it was like, first of all, it was like 80 degrees difference in terms of temperature, right? Like it was bitterly cold up in Buffalo and snowing, and it was absolutely beautiful in Tampa Bay, that wonderful weather. Although apparently it's really cold in Florida this morning, which I saw that earlier on the GMA forecast. But for the Lions, Amir Abdullah didn't play in this game, and it's unclear if it was just because of that neck issue that's been bothering him of late, or whether he might have been benched for performance as well.
The rumors were that that if they wanted him to play, these were all rumors, but there was rumors that that he might have been a healthy scratch, but because he's still banged up, that they can sort of like save him the embarrassment, what have you, and just say that he wasn't healthy enough to go.
He did come into the game as questionable, to be clear, and was limited in his practices when he did practice. So
it feels like maybe
either way,
both factors could be involved here, whether it was performance, whether it was health. Either way, Theo Riddick was the man for the Detroit backfield yesterday. 10 rushes, 29 yards, 2 touchdowns, plus 6 catches for 64 yards, good for 27.3 fantasy points. An awesome day for him out there in Tampa Bay. Golden Tate was awesome as well yesterday. 8 catches, 85 yards, and a touchdown. That's his first outdoor receiving touchdown in the United States since joining the Lions back in 2014, as noted by the great Kyle Soppe. Well
nice
done
note.
Right there.
I saw that came up in conversation yesterday, and I could not believe that was the case, that he had not caught one outside.
Pretty remarkable.
I wish I'd paid attention to that sooner in fantasy. I probably wouldn't have struggled with
Kyle Soppe's got the notes you need to know.
I know.
Eric Ebron has 10 catches yesterday for 94 yards. A chuckle.
The new Jared Cook.
That's right. Yeah. He also fumbled yesterday, so you get you 17.4 fantasy points. If you had the gumption to start him, good for you.
They should star in a buddy cops comedy.
Matthew Stafford.
Ebron and Cook.
Yeah.
Cook and Ebron. Ebron and Cook sounds better.
Yeah, it does kind of work.
Or unless you do, that's a buddy cop, but Cooking Ebron is definitely a restaurant.
Cooking Ebron?
Cooking Ebron?
I wouldn't go there.
Ooh.
No, yeah.
Because the food would be inconsistent.
But maybe that's the show. Maybe it's Cooking Ebron, but and there are these 2 wacky guys that host a restaurant, and it's like they're terrible, and then the one day a restaurant critic shows up, they're actually great, and so he writes this amazing review, and what happens is people keep coming to the restaurant expecting greatness, and of course it's all terrible, it's awful, and you leave in tears.
All of this is copyrighted, by the way. Nobody else can use that story. Right. I trademarked it right now.
Nice job. Well done, Lawyer Squirrel.
There you have it. By the way, Matthew Stafford's a tough dude, man. He is 36 for 44. He threw 2 picks, but he threw 381 yards yesterday, Stephania. No major ill effects of that hand.
No, you know what's interesting? I think by the time that we were wrapping up the show, we sort of got to the place where you didn't know how he was going to look, but we said, what if this looks like kind of a typical Lions game for Matthew Stafford, where he throws the ball a lot and has a couple turnovers, but still has overall a hugely successful day, and that's really how it ended up.
Yeah, he's a beast. He continues to get the job done. He 15.2 fantasy points. Not a massive fantasy day, but still showed a lot of toughness out there for the Detroit Lions. For the Bucs, what a mess of a season it has been. Jameis Winston was fine yesterday, 285 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks, but the pass catchers, Mike Evans, what happened, dude? 2 for 25 in the fantasy playoffs for Mike Evans. It has not been a good stretch for him of late.
6 straight games without a touchdown. Last 2 weeks, 4 catches on 11 targets for 58 yards. Under 5.5 fantasy points in 3 of the last 5.
Right.
And you could blame it on the quarterback, but, he's played under Fitzy and Jameis Winston, and I wish I had an excuse for it.
Right.
I wish there was something, maybe he's a little bit banged up. Maybe he's playing through an injury, Stephania. I'm grasping at straws here.
Yeah.
I literally got nothing. And certainly the quarterback play has been inconsistent, and maybe it's the play calling. Maybe it's playing against Detroit yesterday, he certainly saw some Darius Slay.
But he was not solely shadowed by Darius Slay.
No, I know. Yeah. That's the thing. This is why I'm saying, I'm literally grasping at straws on this one. I got no answers. And in the Celebrity League, so in the podcast Celebrity League, barring some sort of crazy miracle tonight, looks like I'm going to move past Lord and Miller in the first round of those playoffs. And Mike Evans was my number 1 pick in this league, 16-team league, PPR. I'm going to have a decision to make. You tell me what I do next week.
Well, you're playing against me if you win. So
okay,
yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to talk to Stephania here.
Okay.
And also, so I play. We play 2 wide receivers in this league. Obviously, we have a flex.
Thanks for telling me.
But Mike, here are my wide receivers in this league: Mike Evans, Chris Hogan, Devin Funchess. Let's assume Hogan comes back tonight and does well.
Kenny Britt also available.
Yeah. Kenny Britt also.
Tampa Bay plays Atlanta next.
Yeah. Monday Night Football, ESPN.
Ooh, Mike Evans could show up.
He certainly could.
Yeah.
Funchess.
I'd be thinking about that over the week.
And I can't use my flex because I've got Deion Lewis, I've got Alex Collins, I have Devontae Freeman in that league. So I've got my running backs are really good. I don't know.
Yeah.
You got D.D. Westbrook on that roster, too, though.
I have D.D. Westbrook on that roster as well.
Anyways.
I got some decisions to make. I wasn't doing that to try to hashtag humble brag, although I'm pretty good at that, with the hashtag humble bragging. But
you just double humble bragged because you bragged about being good at humble bragging.
That's right. Well done. Look at Princeton catching on to that. The fact of the matter is, I'm merely saying that, is Mike Evans still a must start?
I think he is, personally, but I understand why you might have some animosity towards starting him based off of what Matthew just laid out.
What's weird is I would have said yes, but then I look at my own team and my own situation,
and you don't know.
I don't know.
In a 16-team league, no less. Doug Martin yesterday started for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 10 rushes for 26 yards and a touchdown. Peyton Barber had 12 rushes as well. If anything, I feel like yesterday made me less comfortable starting either one of them.
Fair.
Too much work for both of them.
But I will say also, I feel like if I had to start one of them next week, Peyton Barber once again looked like the better running back.
I know,
but
they seem to be. They gave Martin sunk in on Doug Martin.
Yeah, they gave him the gimme touchdown as well.
What a great game it was in Carolina yesterday between the Vikings and the Panthers. I guess unless you're a Vikings fan, 31-24 is the final for Minnesota. Another great day for. Believe it or not, Adam Thielen, 6 for 105 with a touchdown on 13
Why wouldn't you
targets.
believe it? Guy's been a monster.
That was the point. I was being sarcastic. My wit worked on you, Matthew.
Make a note that field sarcasm voice is exactly like his other voice. Right. So I just need to be aware of that.
Right.
If you could just give me a heads up, if you give me a little finger point, a little hello,
Princeton,
sarcasm coming, that would be helpful for me.
Adam Thielen was great yesterday, 6 for 105. The usual suspects here for the Minnesota Vikings in the passing game. Kyle Rudolph, 3 for 41 and a touchdown. And Stephon Diggs, actually a busy day, 6 for 64 on 10 targets for him. So a bounce-back day of sorts. In Case Keenum, he had 3 separate turnovers. And yet he still got you 19.2 fantasy points, 280 passing yards again, 2 touchdowns again, a season-high 44 passing attempts. Really solid day for Case Keenum when it comes to fantasy football, and this team found a way to grind it out and make this competitive after being down 11 points late. However, it was kind of at the cost of their 2 running backs, as Jerick McKinnon and Latavius Murray literally were victims of game flow. McKinnon, 9 touches, 7.5 points. Murray, 11 touches, 4 fantasy points. Not really putting this on them, it's tough. I don't expect them to play behind against Cincinnati last week.
Also, Also, Vikings lost a key offensive lineman in this game. They
went into the game with no Pat Elflein, their starting center. Mike Remmers, the right tackle, hurt as well. He missed this game. So that offensive line, which is so good, has been banged up now of late.
And Reef.
Riley Reef, also their left tackle, left that game. So, yes, they have been really banged up right now along the offensive line.
And that's been one of the strengths of that team throughout the season. So I think some of that is due to that. But by hook or by crook, Case Keenum continues to get it done. He continues to make the case for being the starting quarterback of this Vikings team.
Speaking of making the case,
see what I did there? Because his first name is Case. And a common phrase is making the case. So that's what I did, just right off the top of my head. Just totally did that. Just crushed that.
Yep. Okay.
So good.
Jonathan
so
Stewart.
good, the wordplay. Just amazing. Amaze balls, honestly.
Good?
Yes.
Jonathan Stewart made the case for himself to be in your starting lineups going forward. Not sure it's that effective, but still. Jonathan Stewart, 16 rushes for 103 yards. Not one, not two. 3 touchdowns for the Daily Show, including a 60-yard
fantasy
run.
frustration. I mean, I was just bitter yesterday. First Jordan Howard, then Jonathan Stewart.
You were a bitter Bell?
Yeah.
Poor bitter Bell.
Here's the bottom line. Jonathan Stewart's still going to be
there you go,
like an RB4 in our rankings each week. Like he's touchdown dependent. He ran great yesterday, but one touchdown was a 60-yard, basically untouched gash. One was a 1-yard touchdown run where he leapt over the pile. And then I don't know the other. I can't remember offhand what the other one was, but still, Jonathan Stewart goes crazy. And
listen, here's a guy that has at least 15 carries in 3 of the last 4 games. I mean, they are using him.
Yeah,
I mean, he's definitely touchdown dependent, but he's got a lot of them. I think he's got 8 on the year. I believe that's correct.
Jonathan Stewart now has 6 rushing touchdowns this season.
Yeah,
has he caught
3
any?
were yesterday.
He has caught 1 touchdown. No, he's not. Yes, he has 1 touchdown catch. Yep,
he's got 7 on the year.
So 7 total touchdowns on the year for Jonathan Stewart. Yeah. And Christian McCaffrey yesterday, quieter day, 3 catches on 18 yards, 8 for 35. I know he made the hate list. Matthew Berry, nice call by you.
Cam Newton.
This guy.
Cam Newton also made the hate list there. Which, by the way, 14.5 points. And, for a quarterback, that's not much. One of the reasons, though, it's interesting. One of the reasons why I quote unquote hated him or hated the matchup was here was a guy. I think the Vikings, the stat that I had was, I'm forgetting the number off the top of my head, but I want to say it was something like the Vikings had given up 56 yards rushing to quarterbacks all year long.
Yeah.
Cam Newton had 70.
Yeah, he had 65 on one play.
Yeah, so that was an unbelievable run. Yeah.
Cam Newton with a brilliant sort of late game surge for the Carolina Panthers. Devin Funchess, 359 with a touchdown yesterday.
Yeah, and Stephania, it felt like to me that he showed up on the injury report, right? I mean, like
Devin Funchess?
Yeah, Devin Funchess.
He has a couple of times in the last couple of weeks, but remember, he's their number 1 receiver with Kelvin Benjamin gone, so they're going to kind of manipulate his schedule during the week so that they have him ready for Sunday, and that's what they did this week.
But no concerns on him going forward?
No, not particularly.
Yeah.
Greg Olsen left this game briefly because of that foot issue, but maybe we're at the point now where, it's fine that he did return, so that's good news.
Here's what happened. He got his foot rolled up on in a way that it was right up over the part that it was already sore. And so he came out of the game, and they looked at it, and they rewrapped it, and they taped it heavier, and he went back in. So I believe he only came out for 3 plays.
Right.
But the problem was he wasn't targeted in the offense. And Ron Rivera talked about it afterward and said, "Yeah, we're going to have to get him more involved, and we didn't really expect to do much with him early on." And Greg Olsen said he was disappointed, but he kind of gets it that he couldn't just jump back into the offense. The part that's disappointing about that to me is that's not how they talked about it beforehand. Now, granted, maybe because he had the flare up and he had to miss that game, they kind of changed paths, but they initially talked about using him in high leverage situations near the goal line, and they just really didn't ever look for him.
Can you trust him going forward, even if you hear healthy? They play the Packers, who so far this year have been pretty good against opposing tight ends. I had somebody ask me before the Sunday morning, Austin Seferian-Jenkins or Greg Olsen.
Yeah.
I said ASJ because I was nervous about Greg Olsen. He had made the hate list this week. I said, I don't have either guy inside my top 10. I wouldn't feel great about it, but I have ASJ, 1 spot higher or something like that, 2 spots higher. ASJ did, in fact, finish better.
Right.
By 1.1 point. So it was the right call.
1 catch for 1 yard for ASJ versus 0 for Greg Olsen.
Correct.
Until further notice, he is not a tight end that you can trust. Just the reality of where he's at in his recovery from that foot issue.
Yep.
The 49ers 3 out of 4 wins for Stephania Bell, San Francisco.
Right.
Break up the
Jimmy
Niners.
Garoppolo. Another good day for Marquise Goodwin. In the second start for Jimmy Garoppolo, Marquise Goodwin goes 6 catches, 106 yards on 12 targets. That's now 205 receiving yards for Marquise Goodwin in 2 games with Jimmy Garoppolo under center. Definitely a player that will be ranked this week, maybe in like wide receiver 4 territory.
Gotta be, and not just Goodwin, right? Who's interesting because look at their upcoming schedule, right? Tennessee, that they're home to the Titans this week. That is a team you can throw on. Now they have Jacksonville at home in week 15, and then they 16. Week 16, and then they're at the Rams in week 17. And who knows? Maybe the Rams be resting some people by the time we get to week 17. But certainly the 49ers are a tempting matchup next week against the Titans secondary. Jimmy Garoppolo has looked the part, Field.
Sure has, Matthew. 20 for 34, 334 yards, a touchdown, interception. I get it. It's a small sample size, but if you don't see the traits of Jimmy Garoppolo, I'm just not sure what you're missing.
I watched that game.
Yeah.
He's calm in the pocket. His passes are on point. I mean,
first 2 weeks is a stat that Thirsty Kyle found, which I think is pretty good. First 2 weeks, Carson Wentz, Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees. The only 3 quarterbacks in the NFL to throw for 290 yards or more in weeks 1 and 2.
Yeah, great stat here. Yep.
Right? First 2 starts for Jimmy Garoppolo, in essence, his week 1 and 2. He's done it as well.
Yep. Sometimes when it comes to quarterback evaluation, there's you know it when you see it, whether a guy can play or not play. Jimmy Garoppolo is one of those that you know it when you see it.
He's a player. Trent Taylor, after the big game last week, comes back down to earth, just 3 targets, 2 of 11.
I thought it was there was a lot of Kyle Juszczyk in this game, and they talked about him a lot in the preseason, and then he had an injury, and you didn't really see or hear from him. And I thought the way they used him yesterday was very interesting. I don't know if that's a plan going forward, but something he was
a very nice pass catching fullback in Baltimore last year, actually the last couple of years. So very and it's one of the reasons they made him such a high paid fullback. I think a lot of people
highest paid in NFL history, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, and I just remember in free agency when that signing happened, a lot of people were like, "Whoa," and a lot of other people were like, "Yeah, if you're saying whoa, you don't understand how good Kyle Juszczyk is."
Well, they certainly could use him much more going forward. The Texans come up short in this game yesterday, but a disheartening situation, Stephania, there's going to be a massive point of conversation today. Tom Savage, the Texans starter, left this game eventually with a concussion, but not after he returned to the game following a scary situation. He took a hit and appeared to have his hands sort of quivering as he was laying sort of listless on the ground.
Right, and you saw the referee approach him. I mean, it's definitely that posturing is it's not uncommon after a concussion. Obviously, the conversation is about what happened between the time that he got hit, when he went out, why he was cleared to come back in. You know, there's a lot of conversation that's bigger than what we can do here. But the takeaway is that there are flaws in the process, and there continue to be flaws in the process, and that's all I'm going to say about it right now.
I was going to say the reality is it's going to come under a lot of scrutiny and pressure today because a lot of people feel as though the process failed Tom Savage, who's allowed to go back into this game. I'm not saying that's Stephania's opinion. I'm just telling you that's a very popular one this morning. He was replaced by T.J. Yates, no relation to me. But T.J. did play very well in relief duties yesterday. At 14
you do
for
root
26.
for T.J. Yates, though.
Well, like anybody that has the last name Yates, I like to see them do well. So T.J. Yates, 14 for 26, 175 yards, 2 touchdowns. And when you have a wide receiver like DeAndre Hopkins, sometimes the best thing you can do is just find a way to hook up with him. Force it if that's what it takes. How about this line from DeAndre Hopkins? 11 for 149, 2 touchdowns on 16 targets. Just a monster day for Nuke Hopkins. He is tremendous. Steven Anderson, very disappointing as a streaming tight end option. 2 catches, 16 yards on 6 targets.
Yeah, well, they were so beat up, but they did get Will Fuller back here, and obviously there's sort of musical chairs at the quarterback position. So I don't know that you're trusting Steven Anderson going forward, but I don't know that you can really.
There are very few great options. I think next year I might reprioritize Gronk, Travis Kelce, Zach Ertz, guys like that in the draft more so than I did this year.
Yeah, I mean, but what's weird is I had that thought process going into some drafts, and I have Greg Olsen on 2 teams.
I know, it's
fluky
Greg Olsen hadn't missed a game since the first week of his career. So I'm telling you, but my point is that There are only so many of them you can trust week to week.
True.
Disappointing day from the New York Jets. They get shut up. They forgot to show up against the Denver Broncos. 23-0 was the final score in the Mile High City. And Josh McCown, their starting quarterback, Stephania, now has a broken hand.
Right. He ended up leaving with a broken hand, and now, according to Rich Smeeney, who covers the Jets for us, he's going to undergo further testing to determine whether he can actually continue to play. It's his non-throwing hand, or what the next steps are medically. So we're waiting to hear that, but a very emotional Josh McCown, who really finally was having a season where he had not been particularly hampered by injury, and then this.
Bryce Petty took over for Josh McCown, but the entire offense had a bad day at the office.
If Josh McCown cannot play, is there any Jet that is startable, that is even worth considering starting next week when they are at the Saints?
No.
I would agree.
I mean, I would agree. I mean, play would be Robbie Anderson.
I guess, but
Desperation play.
But you don't until you know how Petty or
But didn't
Hackenberg
Bryce Petty and Robbie Anderson have a good connection for a couple of games last year?
Good memory, Stephania. Yes, that is correct. Yeah,
I believe there were like a couple games where Robbie Anderson
yeah. That's how Robbie Anderson sort of got on the radar.
Yeah.
It sure
very good
feels
call
like,
by Stephania Bell.
Yeah, I mean, Robbie Anderson probably would be the player that I feel most comfortable with.
But wouldn't feel great about it, and the running back position continues to be a three-headed monster, although Elijah McGuire got banged up in this one.
Yeah, 6 carries, 13 yards for Matt Forte, 2 catches for 21 yards. Bilal Powell, massive disappointment, 13 rushes, 35 yards, just 3.5 fantasy points. The Broncos, where you been? This defense looked much, much better yesterday, obviously dominant. And so, too, was Demaryius Thomas, 8 for 93 for a touchdown on 12 targets. And C.J. Anderson also got a ton of work yesterday. It wasn't very efficient, but it was great to see 22 carries for him. Like, for fantasy purposes, the best thing the Broncos could do would be commit to one back, and it felt like C.J. Anderson was clearly that player yesterday. I mean, at the end of the day, he's probably their most talented runner. It's no guarantee that they commit to him every single week.
Correct.
Maybe you need to see it one more time before you implicitly trust it in the playoffs. I still don't think that I'm going to feel comfortable starting any Broncos running back. They play on Thursday night against the Colts. Not a bad matchup by any stretch. It certainly feels like you'd like to see C.J. Anderson be the 20-touch per game guy.
I guess, but even in a 24-touch game, the guy has single-digit fantasy points here. He's averaging under 3 yards per carry over his last 4 games.
Yep.
He has just 1 touchdown since week 2.
Yeah.
You know,
it's ugly.
He's got a case of the creams.
He sure has a case of the creams. Nicely done,
in terms of his scoring ability. I think Kareem Hunt's a much better player. But.
He sure is. All right, the Titans are a really disappointing team. Titans are 8-5 now. They go to the desert and they just lose, and they lose like in brutal fashion.
What's weird is I don't think they're a disappointing team. I think they've actually overachieved. I do not think this is an 8-5 team.
Interesting, really.
Yeah, I mean, they obviously are. The old Bill Parcells adage, you are what your record is. But Marcus Mariota has been nothing short of brutal this entire year.
That's what I mean, though, is like he's not. But he was not a question mark for them going into the season.
Well, exactly. I mean, and the receiving core of the defense has been up and down this year. Like, DeMarco Murray's been up and down this year.
Yeah, here's the thing. So Delaney Walker, 5 for 42 on 9 targets. He is the Titan that I trust the most.
I would agree.
Starting every single week. He's about the only one that you can actually start with confidence. Derrick Henry scores yesterday, 8 rushes for 20 yards and a touchdown. But how about DeMarco Murray? 11 rushes for 34 yards, 2 receptions for 13 yards, so 6.7 fantasy points for DeMarco Murray. How can you feel like he's anything more than a low-end flex?
You can't. They're on the road at San Francisco, an improving 49ers defense, by the way. The whole team is. And, I mean, DeMarco Murray was on the hate list this week. I bet you he's on the hate list next week, too.
Yeah, he has been terrible. He had 3.5 fantasy points yesterday. That Arizona defense has some good parts. Yeah. As a whole, though, and they lost Taylor Lewan to the Tennessee Titans. That's a big part of their offensive line, and Chandler Jones feasted yesterday for the Arizona Cardinals. But that should not be a game where Marcus Mariota is limited to 160 passing yards, not even 160 passing yards, and 3.5 fantasy points.
Yeah. He did reportedly hurt his knee during that game. Mike Mularkey said something about that after. I mean, obviously it was enough that he was out of the game, but it doesn't help his mobility, which has been seriously hindered this entire season.
And as we know, an ineffective or inefficient passer can have his floor raised significantly by his legs, as we see with Cam Newton every single week. So the Cardinals actually are, they continue to find a way to stay semi-competitive in a lot of games. Kerwin Williams filled in for Adrian Peterson yesterday, and Kerwin Williams had 20 carries for 73 yards, plus a catch for 15 yards. In a non-PPR league, he's actually, like a low-end flex play. 36 carries for 170 yards over the past 2 weeks. Like, the production speaks for itself.
The usage is there. You think about the matchup next week at Washington. You certainly like that. And doesn't seem like there's any timetable for Adrian Peterson's return.
That's, in fact, the language that's been used in Arizona is there is no timetable for his return. He hasn't practiced yet. So whatever's going on, they're not saying much about it, and we don't have much of an update.
All right, well, we'll keep an eye on whether or not Adrian Peterson even practices early on this week. But for now, Kerwin Williams certainly seems like the guy. 5 catches for 44 yards for Larry Fitzgerald. Not a monster day, but we do clap our hands and tip our cap to him as he is now the 3rd all-time receiver in NFL history.
And such a wonderful human being.
Over 15,000 yards. And if he plays the rest of this season at a really high level, I think there's a chance. He's got a chance to bypass to number 2 in the overall list. I mean, he's just ridiculous, is Larry Fitzgerald. 5 for 44, 7 targets, and he's one of their best blockers, too. Like, the guy consistently gets the job done. Ricky Seals-Jones, a popular tight end streamer this week, 1 catch, 20 yards. Not great, but again, that's been a theme so far for tight ends around the NFL on Sunday. Vernon Davis and the Redskins come up short yesterday. Difficult loss. This one got out of hand early, Matthew, but Uncle Vern, is that his nickname?
Yeah, sure.
Is that not a nickname for him?
I've never heard that
I have not either.
I like it.
I like to call him Vernon Ageless, which, by the way, is also not mine. I saw somebody do that on Twitter. That's, which I like that one, but I've not heard Uncle Vern.
All right, I did.
VD.
Whenever I hear Vern, I always think of Ernest P. Worrell.
Sure. Hey, Vern.
Yeah, hey, Vern.
Hey, Vern. No, his name wasn't Vern. Vern was his friend, right?
Yes, correct.
All those Hey Vern movies.
Yeah, Ernest was
like Ernest goes to camp. Ernest goes to jail.
Yep.
Ernest undergoes an experimental operation.
That dude was worth millions of dollars.
That guy laughed all the way to the bank.
Oh, yeah.
You want to talk about bank? The Ernest guy, that guy was a genius.
He was.
Kyle, look up how many awards he won. He probably won. Did he win 2 or 3 Academy Awards, do you think?
Kyle doesn't even know who we're talking about right now.
Anyways, Vernon Davis, who...
By the way, I forgot. By the way, just as long as we're on the subject of movies for a second, happy Star Wars week, guys.
Happy Star Wars week. Bingo.
There you go.
You pumped?
I'm very pumped. I'm very excited.
The 15th, is it the release date? This Friday?
15th, yeah.
This Friday for the Star Wars movie.
The Last Jedi.
Awesome. The Last
We don't know who The Last Jedi is. It might be Stephania. We're not sure. Stephania's giving no hints.
No hints.
I can tell you it's not me.
His nickname.
Okay.
I see one that says Duke, but I don't get that.
For Vernon Davis?
Yeah.
I think I was confusing Uncle Vern. I think that's what people call Vern Lundquist, the great Vern Lundquist, the all-time great play-by-play man.
Also a very talented tight end.
Vernon Davis has 2 catches for 26 yards and a touchdown.
Whoa! Ernest won a Daytime Emmy in 1989. I had no idea about that. That's fantastic. I wonder what for. All right.
Don't know.
All right.
Anyways, I see what you're trying to do. You're trying to deflect attention from the Redskins' bad performance
Is it that obvious?
yesterday. Yes. 2 for 26 with a touchdown for Vernon Davis. The only guy to find the end zone on offense for them. They also scored a defensive touchdown late. Brashad Breeland had a pick 6, but tough day at the office. 17 rushes for 45 yards for Samaje Perine.
They're so beat up.
Just overmatched yesterday.
They got practice squad guys out there, and and to be honest, like, they just didn't play well. Like, I mean, Josh Norman, who was paid a lot of money because he's one of the best corners in the NFL, got absolutely toasted by Tyrell Williams. I mean, that can't happen when you're Josh Norman.
Right. Can't happen.
And yet, it did.
He got toasted. Kirk Cousins really struggles in this game yesterday. 15 for 27, 151 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. Again, this is one of those games. I'm not saying you throw it out because you don't throw any game out in the NFL, but for fantasy purposes, there's not much for us to take away. They just got overmatched from start to finish.
I'm gonna take a chapter out of Matthew's book because I became obsessed with this now because Vernon Davis, former 49er, so I had to find this nickname thing. So apparently he keeps a golf ball in his locker and has a name. Oh, that story doesn't matter. One of the names on his cleats is Duke, which apparently stands for a childhood nickname that followed him to adulthood because his family called his father Big Duke and passed on Little Duke to Davis, but he does not like that because his family members still call him that in his 30s.
Well, we will not call him Duke.
But that's his nickname.
There you go.
And Field has also resolved the Uncle Vern thing. So that's the only nickname I can find for Vernon Davis.
Hopefully that was enough tap dancing that no one remembers anything about the Redskins, and we can just move on.
Yeah, let's talk about the Chargers.
The next two games, by the way, Redskins home to Arizona, home to Denver. Not great. I don't know that Kirk Cousins is a must start.
Yeah, again, I prefer the Arizona matchup or the Denver matchup, obviously, but yeah, I'm with you.
I mean, I think he's going to be a borderline 10. He's going to be in that 8 to 12 range, I would think.
You know who you could start instead of him?
Who's that?
Jimmy Garoppolo.
Oh my goodness,
Jimmy G. So for the Chargers, Philip Rivers just continues his red hot
Should you
play.
go to the county register of Stephania and legally change your name to Stephania Garoppolo? Should you just do that? Should you just?
No.
I mean, get it over with. Just do it.
To me.
No.
Fine. It seems reasonable for me to do that. So Philip Rivers was awesome again yesterday. Yeah. 319 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, nearly 21 fantasy points for him. And listen, Keenan Allen, this is how good he's been of late. Daniel this morning,
so
tongue in cheek, said he only got me 111 yards. Only.
Yeah, stop complaining.
3 straight games with over 100 yards and 10 catches and a touchdown. That was snapped yesterday, but Keenan Allen, you are just marvelous.
And
Melvin.
I have to say it because Keenan Allen was somebody I was so hyped on at the start of the season.
The preseason was on the table, pounding the table for him.
Could not
I was
be
as well.
happier for him that he is having this success. I mean, do you guys remember that he tore his ACL last year? This is a guy coming off a torn ACL. I'm trying to think of somebody else in the league who's doing what he's doing off of a torn ACL this year. I just, props to Keenan Allen. A lot of people wrote him off because of injuries, and I just, it's my role to acknowledge these kinds of things.
I would agree with that. 100%. And by the way, I was pounding the table for him in the preseason. That this is a guy that isn't injury prone. He's unlucky. It's going to be a great offense. But honestly, one of the big reasons I was pounding the table for him in the preseason was because of Stephania's confidence in him. So a great call by Stephania. Great to see it happening here. They are at Kansas City next week. Philip Rivers and the Chargers are going to lead a lot of fantasy teams to the championship game.
Yeah, Austin Eckler might help too. This is just kind of funny. Austin Eckler, 4 rushes for 49 yards, which gets you 4.9 fantasy points. Meanwhile, I play in a league with Keith amongst other people. It's mostly Keith, a couple of our friends from ESPN, and then mostly Keith's friends from growing up.
Right.
One of his friends had the difficult.
So am I not a friend from ESPN, Keith? You can be honest.
Clearly not.
Obviously. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Take
That's
the
all right. I'm not in the league either.
Don't worry about it. Anyways, Matt
Daniel, you in the league?
No.
I'm the commissioner of the league.
Stop it. No, you're not. Thirsty Kyle, you in the league?
No.
He's shaking his head no. All right,
it's
so it's good enough.
It's mostly Keith's friends from growing up.
No, it's mostly Keith's friends, and it's good that we have defined who's a friend of Keith and who is not. Who's a colleague.
This league's been going on for about this is our 4th year, and I'd say just in the past few years, you and I have become a lot closer.
So, see,
all
there
right,
you go.
4 years. Doesn't ESPN have a 13 age? Don't you have to be at least 13 to be able to play fantasy football?
Heyo.
Wow.
It was an age joke.
I get it.
It's been a long time since we've made fun of Field for being young.
That's fair.
Since at least Friday.
We slid him in under the wire. I have some connections.
That is fair. That's fair.
Anyways,
That's a legit answer by Keith, by the way. And by the way, very sweet. That's a very sweet answer too, by the way. I'm just screwing around, but that was actually a very sweet answer by Keith. All right, let's move on to Philadelphia. Right?
Oh, you don't hear about
No,
Austin Eckler?
He's telling a story.
Oh, Austin Eckler.
Right, so Austin Eckler. Anyways,
I got distracted.
David Huff, right? Is that we call him Huffer? So
all right,
David Huff.
Yeah, you got to hear this story. It's actually a good story.
He had put Tevin Coleman into his flex, which meant that he could no longer use, if he had put him in his running back spot, he would have had the opportunity to use either a wide receiver or a running back in his flex on Sunday. Well, he also had Joe Mixon already penciled into his running back spot. So all of a sudden he finds himself needing to fill Joe Mixon's roster spot. And his only running back option were Jamal Charles and Austin Eckler. I'm thinking to myself, nice. That's
right. You're in
pretty
good
good
shape
for me, right?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Austin Eckler gets 49 rushing yards yesterday. I look at the box score and I'm like, how did they get 9.9 points in our league? Austin Eckler had the 3rd most tackles on the Chargers yesterday. He had 5 tackles.
Wow.
5 tackles.
That's hustle.
Nice.
He's a terrific special teams player, is Austin Eckler. So 9.9 fantasy points.
So playing against Austin Eckler in an IDP league,
right?
He gets you 5 tackles.
5 tackles. So we'll see how the matchup shakes out tonight. But that was smart by him. It's good.
What do you need tonight to
I've
beat
got a narrow
the
edge.
Huffer?
I've got, I think, a 0.2 point edge with
0.2?
0.2.
Wow.
I've got Brandon Cooks, and I can choose between Deion Lewis and Kenyon Drake.
Okay.
He has Ndamukong Suh and Rex Burkhead. So,
okay,
it's like anything's possible in that matchup.
Could go either way.
Unfortunately,
you
yesterday...
need Cooks to do something.
Right. Unfortunately, just the news of the day yesterday is that Philadelphia Eagles quarterback Carson Wentz left their game after 4 touchdowns, 291 passing yards, 27.2 fantasy points. And Stephania, as of this podcast, we are still fearing that he tore his ACL.
Right. Adam Schefter reported that was what the team feared. Obviously, going for more testing today. The manual exams are pretty good, and Adam actually referenced this in his news story that when the team examined him, they felt the instability, and that's the hallmark of basically diagnosing, at least early on, that it's a torn ACL, and the MRI is more of a confirmatory test, but it also will show you if there's other injury, if this is just an isolated ACL tear, which is a little bit more straightforward, versus a multi-ligament tear or something like that. We did see Carson Wentz stay in and throw that touchdown pass. Obviously not moving very well, but he stayed in for a few plays and then done for the day, left with a big knee brace on, which is standard procedure, and we await the rest of the news on him.
Just terrible news, and I can promise you this. We'll dig into this more and analyze it more once we get further confirmation about the exact nature of Carson Wentz's injury. For now, we are presuming that he is going to be out for the season. Matthew, your initial instinct as to what that means for Alshon Jeffrey and the other players in this offense you're counting on week to week.
It's not great.
Yeah.
It's not great, but I think the positives here, to the extent that there are any, is that we've seen Nick Foles have success in the NFL. We've seen him have success in an Eagles uniform, obviously not under Doug Peterson, but Doug Peterson is a fantasy-friendly coach. It is a fantasy-friendly offense. And they'll coach him up. Foles will be, will get all the first-team reps. And, it's one thing to be throwing to, whoever, but now you're throwing to Alshon Jeffrey. Now you're throwing to Nelson Aguilar, who, made an unbelievable one-handed catch. The turnaround Nelson Aguilar has made to his career is remarkable. Yep. And obviously, we'll see if Zach Ertz makes it back next week or if it's another week of Trey Burton. But there's enough skill players there, and there's enough of a run game there. I think you see a little bit more of the run game. Obviously, maybe they lean on that a little bit more. It's nice that they have that depth so they can rotate those 3 guys in behind that offensive line. And so I think if you're an Eagles fan, it is not ideal, but I think it could be worse. And, if you are somebody who has one of these guys on your roster, again, it ain't great, but you certainly feel better about your Eagles players today than you do about your Jets players, for example, unless, we'll see what happens with McCown, obviously.
You sure do. And the reality is a lot of people probably rode Carson Wentz this far into the playoffs, maybe even advanced past the first round of the playoffs because of Carson Wentz's 27.2 points. I'll just say
that's the biggest blow. And so, hey, is Aaron Rodgers available in your league? You're obviously going to look there.
Right.
But you may be looking through the Jimmy Garoppolos of the world, the Deshaun Kaisers of the world, the
Blake Bortles.
I was just going to say, believe it or not, the Blake Bortles of the world.
And so that's where we're at right now with the fantasy, with the waiver wire, which will be out tomorrow. I've written most of the column, and I can just tell you, again, there's not that many quarterbacks that are readily available to be picked up at this time. Trey Burton, as you mentioned, Matthew, was awesome yesterday.
Well, and by maybe it depends on your options and everything like that, but maybe it's Nick Foles.
Right. Mm-hmm. We'll keep an eye as to what we get in terms of confirmation on Carson Wentz, perhaps as soon as this afternoon.
Hoping for the best, but didn't look
feel
great.
For the kid.
Absolutely. Feel for Carson Wentz, who by all accounts is just an awesome person.
Yep.
Having a magical season. Listen, and I'm a Redskins fan. Eagles fans drive me crazy.
Sure.
Just as a Redskins fan, and I feel terrible for them because it's been such a great season for them, and it's a franchise that has been up and down, obviously, in recent times. So that stunk. Stunk.
Todd Gurley, 13 rushes for 96 yards and 2 touchdowns for the Rams yesterday, 28.5 fantasy points. He has just been great. This game was one of the best to watch yesterday.
Like that, he might be the
bounce back player of the year.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was looking for. It was like a comeback, bounce back. It's not really a comeback, but it's like he's been resurrected as a fancy player.
I was Sean McVay. I was having a conversation with somebody who said to me, and they know I'm a huge Redskins fan. He said Redskins should have kept McVay and let go of Gruden. I'm like, well, that's so tough, to basically fire a head coach who's done a good job for an unproven coordinator.
Right.
And the friend said to me, he says, I hear you, but McVay once in a generational talent.
Interesting. He's been fantastic so far. Even in a defeat yesterday, this offense clearly is so far
Have you ever
ahead.
met him?
I have.
McVay?
Yeah.
So I've hung up's the wrong word. I've had conversations with him like at the combine a few different times. He's awesome.
Yeah, he's great.
He is like,
you need to back off.
I know.
First off,
really.
Sean McVay is my best friend, and I've been saying it all year long on
no,
this
you
podcast.
have not.
Are you not?
Go back and look. Go back and look. Yet last year from the combine, like I kept talking about how he was the real deal.
You know what happened before the combine?
What's that?
The owners' meetings.
Whatever, dude. I've been McVay.
I said it way before that.
It's like a little.
I like Sean McVay more than you.
No, you do not.
Yes,
I like Sean McVay more than you.
Is my
Go back
best
to when
friend.
he was an assistant to the Redskins for my team.
We are going to trade Christmas cards this year.
Stop
you
it.
Stop. You stop.
No,
I'm going to break this tie. I'm going to break this tie. You ready?
Sure.
Daniel, Matthew, where did Sean McVay go to college?
The University of Awesome.
Okay. Incorrect. Daniel?
He did not go to the University of Awesome. Technically, I am the winner.
Wow, Field.
Wow.
I was too busy.
You
I
know,
was still.
you know who
you know
knows
what?
the
I was
answer?
He went. You want to know? He went to Miami of Ohio. Is where he went.
You heard Keith. Miami of Ohio was a Red Hawk there.
Cool.
He's a walk-on player.
So not cool. So not cool. I knew that actually.
Yeah,
I just
you know
completely
what?
forgot.
Just completely forgot. Right.
But
me too. I also totally knew that, but I just completely forgot.
No, but like when he was an assistant
Who
with the
was his
Redskins,
grandfather?
go back and listen.
The GM for it.
Stop it
for the 49ers.
Go back and listen to podcasts from 2 years ago, like when he was with the Redskins.
Let's get back to
I understand. I just want to win an argument with Sean McVay is my boy.
Okay.
Anyway, I miss him.
All right. Sean McVay is awesome. We all universally agree on that.
And I want to give one quick shout out, though, also to Greg Olson, the quarterbacks coach of the Rams, who's done a great job with Jared Goff this year.
Cooper Kupp, 5 catches, 118
Not
yards.
his name.
Matthews Little Cooper Kupp, 5 catches, 118 yards, and a touchdown on 7 targets yesterday. Good to see that. Sammy Watkins, 3 receptions, 21 yards, and a touchdown. Another touchdown for him. Low volume, but he continues to find a way.
Little Cooper Kupp were a little faster.
Yes.
There might have been another touchdown for him.
He had been scoreless for 5 weeks.
He's got so much talent, but speed ain't one of them.
And this is, listen, Cooper Kupp was on the hate list. Just a bad call by me. Like he was legit on the hate list. The Eagles had given up 10 receptions, literally 10 receptions total to slot receivers in the last 5 games. And then my little Cooper Kupp proves why he's my little Cooper Kupp.
Robert Woods could be back next week for them in this game against the Seahawks.
I think there's a very good chance of that, yes.
Speaking of the Seahawks, they go down to Jacksonville, and this game got crazy late. It was 30-24 was the final. Russell Wilson is just remarkable. No quarterback had finished higher than QB 14 against Jacksonville in a game this season. Russell Wilson gets you 21.8 fantasy points. Now, a lot of it was because he was just throwing basically like arm punts down the field, hoping his receivers would catch them. Picked off 3 separate times, but he had 50 rushing yards, and he had 3 touchdown passes, did Russell Wilson. 8 straight games with multiple passing touchdowns. He could well finish as the number 1 quarterback in fantasy this year. Tyler Lockett had a long catch for a touchdown. Paul Richardson had a long catch for a touchdown. Doug Baldwin, 3 catches for 78 yards and a touchdown. So I think the actionable, again, this is week 15, is first of all, Jimmy Graham, what the heck happened there? 0 catches, 0 yards. That's a tough pill to swallow, Matthew.
Yeah,
these things
but he's
happen. What are you going to do?
What are you going to do? I mean, you have to keep starting. I mean, he's still a top 5 tight end. He's been so amazing in terms of the scoring.
Right? He's been unbelievable.
Yeah,
he's been unreal. But he has 0 catches yesterday. I am interested though in Mike Davis going forward. He's got 31 carries over the past 2 weeks, 128 yards in a deeper league.
It's been some tougher matchups, but he runs hard, and it's clear they like him.
Yeah.
Pete Carroll saying, by the way, earlier this week that Chris Carson had suffered a setback. He'd been sort of optimistic about Chris Carson's return. Stefania's sort of shaking her head.
Well, only because when he was optimistic about his return, I was like, and then it was like,
Pete Carroll's always optimistic about injuries too, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I mean, Mike Davis runs hard, looks the part, and certainly, it's been some tough sledding there. But they play the Rams next week.
Yep, they sure do.
You can run on the Rams.
You can run on the Rams. So the Jaguars, by the way, Jaguars.
Did you guys talk about Jimmy Graham?
We did. Yes.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I pulled a Matthew.
Okay.
Okay. Don't worry.
I have no hot
water.
water.
Our moments.
It's affecting me.
Leonard Fournette leads the Jaguars with 21.9 fantasy points yesterday, but how about D.D. Westbrook? 5 catches.
D.D. Westbrook.
Third straight game with at least 5 catches for D.D. Westbrook. He also scored his first professional touchdown yesterday. He had 8 targets.
Congratulations.
He is on the radar for waiver wire.
As well, he should be 27 targets in the last 3 weeks. I mean,
look what he's got coming up.
It's an
Houston,
unbelievable
San
special.
Fran, Tennessee.
3 great matchups to end the season, Stephania. Great point by you. So, Blake Bortles has been good.
He's been really good. He's got in 6 of his last 7 games. He has
he's Bortled his way to fantasy relevance here, Field.
Yeah, I say last 7 games, he got 17.7 fantasy points per game. Roethlisberger, for reference, we'll talk about him in a second. 17.4 fantasy points per game for him. Blake Bortles would be my pick if you are looking for a quarterback that you can add and potentially use the rest of the way to replace Carson Wentz. If it's not Aaron Rodgers, again, of guys that are available in over 50% of leagues,
80% available for Blake Bortles.
Blake Bortles, he has found a way. He's playing for a lot, and he has certainly played well of late for this team.
He really has multiple touchdown passes each of the last 2 weeks. And to Stephania's point, Houston next week they're home against the Texans, then they're at San Francisco, and then they're at Tennessee.
Right.
I will say that I do think the 49ers defense is playing better. But still,
but again,
that's not a schedule that scares you.
It is not.
And as you're talking about desperate times call for desperate measures, and you've lost Carson Wentz. Yes.
Last game of the night was an awesome one between the Ravens and the Steelers. The final was 39-38 Pittsburgh. Just back and forth and back and forth. For Baltimore, I give them credit for this. Alex Collins may have been the best player added during the final roster cutdowns. He was cut by the Seahawks. He was signed by the Ravens on September 5th to their practice squad. He has emerged into a stud. Daniel and I were talking about this. Maybe it was Kyle, one of us before the podcast. Like, not only does he look good, like does he produce well? He looks like a looks like a dude.
Right.
He's got the black visor face mask, and the whole look
reminds you of
built a certain way. Like,
I was just gonna say, reminds me of like kind of early Marshawn Lynch, kind of thing.
Runs angry,
and
yet he's so agile on his feet, which I attribute to the Irish dancing bit. But but seriously,
I know what you mean. It's
he to see a runner who runs as hard as he does, but is then as nimble as he is something you just don't see very often.
His effectiveness is one of the reasons why Danny Woodhead can't seem to get anything going. They don't need to. I mean,
4 catches for 29 yards for Danny Woodhead last night. But Collins, here's the numbers on Collins: 18 rushes, 120 yards, and a touchdown. 2 catches for 46 yards. If you saw that one of those catches, the long one, like he sort of pirouetted on the sideline, ran around, around, through people all night. Alex Collins, our hat goes off to you. He actually should have had 2 touchdowns last night. He had a touchdown that was this close, and the Ravens ran this play they often run where Buck Allen lines up as a fullback, and they just give him a short dive right behind the center. Buck Allen had 2 touchdowns last night. 6 for 25 for 2 touchdowns for Buck Allen. Hard for me to have him as anything more than like a low-end running back 4, probably.
Yeah, I mean, Collins has been terrific. 5 rushing touchdowns in his last 4 games. He's averaging just about 20 touches a game over the last 4, and somehow still started in only 35% of leagues yesterday, which I thought was really surprising given his production, given the fact that Ryan Shazier was out for the Steelers.
Yeah, it needs to be more than 35%.
I think he's a must-start. I think he is in must-start territory.
And they have a very favorable schedule to finish the season. At Cleveland, home to Indy, home to Cincinnati.
You're not scared of any of them.
Finally, for the Pittsburgh Steelers, it comes down to the killer bees. Big Ben, Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell. How about this? Le'Veon Bell.
Their kicker.
And Chris Boswell.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he's been really good fantasy kicker, by the way.
When you need it's just nice to see fantasy superstars come through when you need them.
Le'Veon Bell, 39.5 fantasy points, 9 catches, 77 yards, and a touchdown, 2 rushing touchdowns. Antonio Brown didn't even score yesterday, but he still got you 32.3 fantasy points.
Looked amazing.
11 catches,
again.
213 yards. He's unreal. And then Ben Roethlisberger in a bad matchup. Get you 28.7 fantasy points.
I can't even believe it.
6 passes for Ben Roethlisberger. Became the first player in NFL history with 3 separate games with 500 or more passing yards. New England at Houston, Cleveland going forward. You feel comfortable starting Big Ben the rest of the way, Matthew?
Sure.
Yeah.
I don't know how you can. It was something like, and I don't have this in front of me, but I feel like Roethlisberger, Antonio Brown, Chris Boswell, Le'Veon Bell, all basically top 2 at their position for the week.
Sounds about
it's
right.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, they have all been awesome. Ben Roethlisberger led the way amongst quarterbacks. Same with Brown. I'm saying with Bell for running backs, and I believe Brown for wide receivers. That's all we got. They win. Yeah. They hold pace. They are now 11-2. They have an inside track to a top 2 seed in the AFC, and if they win next Sunday against the Patriots, I believe
that's going to be fun, right?
Yeah. So if the Patriots win tonight, it could be 11-2 versus 11-2 going into that
cool
game
to
on
see
Sunday.
Chris Hogan back on the field.
Chris Hogan, they play tonight.
Hogan
against the Dolphins. In the meantime, find Stephania on Instagram, StephaniaB87, and also on Twitter at Stephania_ESPN. Matthew Berry, TMR on all forms of social media except for the Fantasy Life app. He's at Matthew Berry. He's got a television show today at 2:30 on ESPN every single Monday.
That's right, and then it repeats at 5 p.m. Eastern on ESPN2, and always available on demand on the ESPN app.
I'm at Field Yates. Talk to you guys tomorrow.
Peace out.
The theme song of the Fantasy Focus was created and performed by Eric Hutchinson. Check out more of his music at erichutchinson.com. Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Focused Football Podcast. For more great podcasts, listen on the ESPN app or subscribe on iTunes.
You can always count on Bud Light, just like you can always count on Always Game Gary. No bar is too far. No wing sauce is too hot. Not for Gary. Always Game Gary is famous among friends. He deserves a Bud Light. Enjoy responsibly. Bud Light Beer, AB St. Louis, Missouri.